Coming of Jesus Christ is actually not a fact if it's something that hasn't occurred yet. However, according to Scripture, the second coming of Jesus Christ is a truth. It is a truth. If a fact is something that is done that's in the past, then all facts are truths, but in this sense, not all truths are facts. So, using these kind of parameters, we could say, for instance, that what we're celebrating in a couple of weeks, the resurrection of Jesus Christ, we could say that's a fact. By the way, before it was a fact, when Jesus had not yet been crucified and risen from the dead, before it was what we're defining here as a fact, when it was still very much a truth, notice how great the controversy was around the subject of the possibility of the resurrection of Jesus Christ. When it was still in that form, oh my goodness, there was even controversy among believers of Christ about this whole plan of what? You're going to go and you're going to die and then you're going to be resurrected? I don't think so. But once it happened, once it became the fact, things began to change. All the misunderstandings and all the questions that the disciples had were put to rest. So we could say that about the resurrection, but let's go back now to the return of Christ. The return of Christ is not yet a fact in this. It's not yet a fact. Perhaps that partly explains all of the controversy that surrounds it today within the church, among Christ's own followers. But I want to ask something about the church. Is the church missing something here? Would the church be better off if we treated his return more as a truth and stopped fighting over the facts? Then we might be able to fulfill Hebrews 10:25, which says, encourage one another as you see the day approaching. Not argue with one another, divide as churches with one another as you see the day approaching, but actually encourage one another because it is a truth. The one word that I think that we can all agree on, after we take a close look here at the words of Jesus, the one word that I think we can all agree on out of Mark 13, that's where we're going to be today, is in Mark 13, is the word watch. Watch. In Mark 13, and by the way, to our guests, I'll just mention that what we're doing is working our way through the book of Mark. And each Sunday taking a different chapter. So we don't take the entire chapter, we take a portion of each chapter. And in this chapter, today we're going to look at the close, at the end of it. Now I just might mention this. This chapter is full of prophecy, and much of it has to do with the destruction of Jerusalem, which took place in 70 AD. So Jesus is speaking here in Mark 13 somewhere around the year 30 AD, and he's telling them about what's going to happen in 40 years, but he doesn't say it's going to be in 40 years. He just says, this is what's coming. But he then kind of switches over from the destruction of Jerusalem to his second coming. And that's where we are by the time we get to today's passage, which begins in the 32nd verse of the 13th chapter of the book of Mark. But about that day or hour, no one knows, not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son, but only the Father. Be on guard. Be alert. You do not know when that time will come. It's like a man going away. Leaves his house, puts his servants in charge, each with their assigned task, and tells the one at the door, keep watch. Therefore, keep watch, because you do not know when the owner of the house will come back, whether in the evening or at midnight or when the rooster crows or at dawn. If he comes suddenly, do not let him find you sleeping. What I say to you, I say to everyone, watch. I don't think you can miss it. I don't think you have to be a preacher that studies homiletics to read that passage and know and miss that the whole purpose of Jesus' words are watch. Well, look, we just read it. Verse 33, be on guard. Also verse 33, be alert. Verse 34, keep watch. And then it says it again in verse 35, keep watch. Says it another way in verse 36, not sleeping. And then in verse 37, same old word, watch. There's 5 phrases, and there's one word that I just mentioned here that are in these verses that mean to stay alert, the opposite of sleep. By the way, are we ever more unalert than when we're asleep? Why? Why this need that Jesus is giving us here for vigilance? Why this need for vigilance? I see 2 reasons. One of them would be kind of on the positive side, and one would have a negative in it. So let's look at it, first of all, the positive side. Now, by the way, let me check back here with our sound. Am I on this mic? Not having, because have I heard it cut out? Yeah, kind of what I thought too. Yeah, okay. So if you think it's doing it too much, you can put me back into this one. Whatever y'all think, it's your call. Then I can blame them, you know. No, I do not blame them. They are wonderful, wonderful. So yeah, whatever. All right. We're going to look at these 2 reasons. Here's the first. Reasons for what? We're staying alert. Why is it so important? Number 1, because we do not know who is coming. Oops.
We do know.
I love it. I love it. If I get it wrong,
We do know.
you get it right. We do know who. Now, what we're going to say later on is we do not know, and you can fill your little blank in there if you want, when. But we do know who. Who is coming? Verse 35 says, the owner. Some versions, the master. Now, ladies, let's just say you're in one of those old traditional, kind of more old-timey roles known as the housewife mom, and your husband calls. It's 5 o'clock. And he says, I'm headed home for dinner. Now, like I said, if you're the chief cook and bottle washer, you're thinking, no big deal, it's just the same old guy coming home for dinner that always comes. But if he says, and I'm bringing someone with me, you perk up. If he says, I'm bringing the boss, okay. Or if he says, I'm bringing mother, okay. Of course, what if he says, I'm bringing Matthew McConaughey with me? Ooh, big deal. Time to what? Time to get ready. The difference is in who. Who. We do know who is coming. And who would that be? Now, we'd say Jesus. Let's just remember. That's the King of Kings. That's the Lord of Lords. In this passage, it is the owner. It is the master of the house. But the house would parallel in this story the church, his bride, his house, his kingdom, which he has bought, or whom he has bought and paid for with his priceless blood. That's who's coming. I'm a real fan of an old Baptist pastor by the name of Vance Havner. Long gone now. But his homespun wisdom, I loved it. I quote him here. Vance said, "The early believers were not looking for something to happen. They were looking for someone to come." Looking for the train to arrive is one thing, but looking for someone we love to come on that train is another matter. Too generally, he said, nothing gets mentioned of his return at all. Bringing in the kingdom is preached, but not bringing back the king. I'm not looking for signs. We've had plenty of them. I'm listening for a sound. Every time you see a scoffer who says, "There are no signs of his coming," you've just seen another sign. I'm listening for a shout. Why? Because it's a who. And we know who that is. He is the master, the owner of the church, of his servants. That would be us, his children. We belong to him. We are the church. And as part of the church, he has put us, 34, verse 34 says, in charge. What? He's put us in charge of what? Not one another. Run into big problems if we think we're in charge of one another. Verse 34 says, each with his assigned task. Now here's part of watching. Have you taken the time to discover what your task is that he's assigned to you? When he returns and he looks at you, he will be looking to say, now I gave you this certain talent or ability, I gave you this gift to help prepare for my coming. Did you? We sang out of a parable that Jesus told, keeping the lamps trimmed and bright. The tasks that he's given us. You know, a servant of the house doesn't just sit looking out the window waiting for their guests. Working and watching go together. But so many just want to wait. Let's just wait. And let's argue about what's really going to happen when he comes. But what Jesus is saying here is, do your task. Go to work. I think about Nehemiah. You remember that task that Nehemiah had back in the Old Testament when he had to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem? And when you read that story, all those individuals that he got working on the wall, they each had a task. And they were to be at their task, but at the same time, armed for battle. That's being ready. That's watching. That's when you're doing your job with your eyes open. We must be on alert. Why? Because we do know who is coming. Yeah. We do know who is coming. But we don't know everything. Especially we do not know when. We do not know when he's coming. And he tells us exactly what we don't know, even though we think we do. Well, some think they do. He says, we do not know the day. About the day, no one knows. That's what verse 32 said. And yet, so many have actually set specific dates. To their dismay, it's great to do a little research on date setters. This one particular one that I looked at said, well, there have been at least 17 predictions documented between 53 AD and 1910, and I'm sure many more, but this particular article said 17. Guess who leads in the predictions? The Jehovah's Witnesses. They have the most wrong doomsday predictions. True. Love them. Think that they're a little off when it comes to the true gospel of Jesus and who Jesus is. Wikipedia said beginning in 1914, that was one of their first dates. And if you go from 14 even just to 1984, there's a total of eight times that they were incorrect. And they're not the only ones. There's a guy named Edgar Wisnant. I remember when his book came out in 1988. And Edgar's book was titled 88 Reasons Why the Rapture is in 1988. Well, he said it would be September 11th to 13th, somewhere in there. He was wrong. 1989 came. He put out another book. Came out with a new book called 89 Reasons Why the Rapture is in 1989. I guess he sold a few of those too. How about Harold Camping? Maybe some of you remember that name, a radio evangelist. He predicted September 1994. And his book was full of numerology, and guess what all the numbers added up to? 1994. In 2011, when his first prediction didn't actually come true, he said, well, May 21st, 2011, that's going to be the day of the rapture. When that proved inaccurate, then he claimed that a non-visible spiritual judgment had taken place, spiritual judgment, and that the physical rapture would occur now on October 21st, 2011. Didn't. So Jesus told us that. We don't know the day. In fact, he said, we don't know the hour. And you know one of the reasons we don't? He names these four watches, 6 to 9, evening, 9 to 12. They call the midnight watch, the rooster crowing watch, the dawn. And of course we know it's going to be a different hour across the world for different individuals. If it's morning here, it's going to be night over there. We don't know the hour, he said. And then he uses this other phrase, we don't even know the time. And he's not talking there about the hour. He's already said that. He's talking, kairos is the word that's used here in the original, which means a specific measure of time, but it can be a week, a month, a year. We might see it as season. You don't know the season. Well, who knows, Lord? This is real interesting, his response on all of this. He says in verse 32, only the Father knows. Wow. Now, something's kind of interesting in Jewish culture would be the wedding days in Jewish culture would involve the father finally giving the word to the groom. Isn't that interesting? Okay, it's time. It's time. Go get your bride. If you had asked the groom, when's your wedding day? I don't know. It's when Dad says it is. So the Father would say, and give the green light. And here Jesus says, only the Father knows. Now, all I can say is, for some reason, the Godhead, the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, they talked this one over long before time. And for reasons that I'm not sure I understand, they said, we're going to let the Father make this decision. And we are in total agreement that that's how it's going to be. Maybe they just wanted each one of us to live with the expectation that the coming of Jesus can be fulfilled at any moment in our lifetime. Why? Why would they want us to have that kind of a thought process? So that we would stay alert. So that we would be watching. Because we do know who, but we don't know when. Do you know what the best biblical answer is for when? Anytime. That's the best biblical answer. When's he coming? Anytime. You mean he could come right now? Yes, he could. Like a thief in the night. What is he saying? Is he saying that Jesus is a robber? No. Coming like a thief, because you do not know when the thief is going to arrive. You see, we've spent too much time, just too much time, looking at the second coming instead of looking for it. Instead of putting the second coming under a microscope, we need to view it through a telescope, waiting expectantly. Anyone genuinely interested in the second coming is above all a watcher, watching in a state of readiness, in a state of anticipation, and if you go with what John said in his epistle, in a state of holiness. Yeah, John said anyone who really has this hope keeps himself pure. That's all about watching. I want to just wrap this up with a quote. First, on a page I have here, and then from the Word of God itself. You may be well versed in the finer details of Revelation's complex maze, but watch. You may have you may have your dispensations right, but your disposition wrong. Therefore, watch. Your knowledge of Bible prophecy may confound the less enlightened, but are you watching? You may be able to take newspaper in one hand, Bible in the other, and point out the signs of the times, but are you watching? Let's stand together. I want to read the 37th verse one more time. We've already seen it once. I want to read these words to you. What I say to you, I say to everyone, watch. Are you ready? We call this decision time. We give anyone who needs to make a decision for Christ an opportunity to just say, you know what? I need to do that. I haven't done it. I'm going to do it right now. And while we sing, you can come to the front. I'll be glad to receive that confession of faith from you if you're ready to make Jesus Christ Lord of your life. Follow him. But I think we all just need to sing this song with the attitude in mind, we may never get to the end of it. He may be told by the Father, now. Let's sing it together, all right?